Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video I want to look at a few computer ads online so that we can get familiar with the various terminology that they use to describe the components. So I just picked on tigerdirect.com, and if you're in my CIS 120 class, you're going to see a number of quiz questions where I take a picture of an ad at Tiger Direct and then ask you a number of questions about it. Well, let's see what kind of questions you might get. Now, I'm here in the category for desktop computers first, and I'm going to click on this generic one here, but it's about 580 bucks. Let's click on this ad, and let's see what we've got here. So, iBuyPower Element Mini. So this is the iBuyPower is the brand of the computer. Probably in a quiz situation I might give you something a little bit more recognizable, like a Dell or an HP. And gaming desktop PC. Now let's go through some of these key terms here. One of the questions I might ask you is, who makes the processor for this particular computer? So the processor, or the CPU, or the central processing unit. This one is made by AMD. And AMD is one of the several big companies that makes computer processors. You're probably familiar with Intel. They advertise quite a bit, but maybe on more budget computers you might see AMD a little bit more often. So AMD is simply the name of a company, and Ryzen, the Ryzen 5, that is simply the model of this particular CPU. So just like Honda makes different models of cars, AMD makes different models of processors. And Intel makes different models of processors. And of course, some big companies like Apple, they're making their own processor. Okay, so AMD is the company that makes the processor for this particular computer. You might value an Intel processor more, or if you're going for a Mac, you might value the M1 processor. So the type of CPU it has can factor into the price of that computer. Now off to the side we've got some other numbers here, but one that you're going to see quite a bit is the clock speed, or the speed of that processor. And the bigger the number, the better it is, the faster it is. So this one is at 3.6 gigahertz, which is like 3.6 billion cycles per second. So gigahertz, and you're going to see that a lot for the CPU speed. And all things being equal, if you have a CPU that's a little bit faster than another computer you're looking at, hey, you might try to go with that faster one. Of course, it's probably going to add to the price. Now, the other thing you're going to see on here is some reference to maybe DDR. Well, this is the computer's memory, or RAM. Now, if the ad uses the word RAM, I'm likely to ask you about memory. If the ad uses the word memory, I'm likely to ask you about RAM. So I want you to make the connections between those terms. And kind of like with CPU clock speed, the more memory you have, the better, and the more expensive that computer is going to be. So this particular computer is at 8 gigabytes of memory, which I think is kind of on the low side. Remember, this is a budget computer under $600. So 16 gigabytes of memory I think is probably a more practical minimum to go for, especially if you are going to be doing things like gaming or video editing or photo editing, watching movies and things like that. You know, the more memory your computer has, then the more things you can do at once. So this computer has 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now the DDR stands for dual dynamic RAM. I'm not usually going to ask you about that in the CIS 120 class, but I do want you to make that connection that DDR is RAM. Now the other thing you can do in these kinds of questions when they pop up, and something that's important for me, for you, is I want you to know what's realistic. So if I ask you, how much memory does this computer have, I'm going to give you a multiple choice question, and some of the answers, or some of the responses on that multiple choice, are going to be things like 240 gigabytes, 3.6 gigahertz, and I'll grab numbers from there. However, 240 gigabytes is not realistic for computer memory, at least for standard computers that a home user would buy. 8 gigabytes is on the low end, but 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, that's probably what you would typically see. Now, a number like 240 gigabytes is not practical for memory, but it is practical for hard drive storage. In particular, so this computer has a 240 gigabyte drive. The SSD stands for a solid state drive, which is the kind of storage you might see in a tablet or a thin notebook or your phone even. So solid state drive means it has no moving parts. It tends to run cooler, it tends to run faster, but it's also more expensive. So some computers will have multiple hard drives. This one, it looks like it just has one 240 gigabyte solid state drive. And then we have a 2 gigabyte NVIDIA GeForce. That's the graphics card. So this computer has a separate graphics card, graphics processor, and that particular graphics processor has 2 gigabytes of its own memory. So that's kind of a nice feature. So NVIDIA is a company that makes graphics cards, graphics processors for computers. And then we see this one is Wi-Fi capable. And another question I might ask you is what company makes the operating system for this computer? Not Windows. Windows is the operating system, but of course Windows is produced by Microsoft, so Microsoft would be that company. So there's just a little bit of terminology that we might see for a particular computer ad. I think I'm going to do one more video here where we look at maybe some different computers and kind of see how fast we can answer some of these potential questions. Thanks.